So what is one of the biggest sales challenges facing us as sales managers today? What I'd like to do is to step you through a short 5-slide discussion on our take on this particular subject. In our discussions with sales managers and CEOs alike, we constantly hear that they're confident in their sales team's ability to close business once they're in front of a target. Their biggest challenge, or their barrier to success, if you will, is their team's inability to get enough of those initial appointments that actually begin the selling process. And I think we can all agree that there certainly are very many talented people in sales, so why has it proved so difficult for sales teams to solve this problem over the years? And our research and experience with our clients has led us to conclude that everyone has been operating under a mistaken assumption. The assumption that to get quality targets into the pipeline, we can just use the same processes, skills, and tools that work so well to move a prospect through the pipeline. After all, selling is selling, right? The result of this mistaken assumption has been the application of traditional approaches to fixing it that has been both ineffective and inefficient. For instance, companies that tried to address the efficiency challenge say they did so using the same CRM and Salesforce management applications they did to help them drive prospects through the pipeline. Companies that tried to address effectiveness tell us they did so by applying the same scripts and objection handling approaches they used later in the selling process. And when all of that failed to consistently get the desired results, most managers fall back on the traditional mantra, make more dials. In the years we've been doing this, we've come to some conclusions on how a lot of sales teams approach the need for getting more targets into the pipeline. And this is actually one of my favorite expressions in sales, as we all get hooked on hopium, as I call it, from time to time. But how it applies here is that management thinks, or hopes, shall we say, that everyone just knows how to do this. They know how to set appointments when they come on board. After all, as we talked about a minute ago, it's all sales, right? Well, one of the reasons for this is that as managers, we've never really had the visibility into what I like to call that magical black box of the appointment making process. All we see is the number of dials being made, and that's if we can trust the numbers that our sales professionals provide us, and the number of appointments we see. So therefore, we've never really had the ability to actually realize that there were differences between this phase of selling and the pipeline. Target acquisition has several important components, but as an overall category, it's really treated as an afterthought too often. First of all, as long as reps have enough names to call on, they tend to stay out of our hair, right? Secondly, the target lists themselves are maintained in spreadsheets on big cheap yellow pads or in our CRMs along with our prospects and customers. Next, targets are generally pursued as Bob Howard, the president and founder of Contact Science, likes to call drive-by shootings. In other words, there is no forethought to the process of pursuing those targets, no predetermined number of attempts, frequency of those attempts, or messaging used in voicemails or emails. As a matter of fact, each rep is generally left on their own when it comes to what to say to get the appointment or even how to handle gatekeepers. And even in the big vertical market selling training courses like banking, Cohen and Brown's, in insurance, Kinder Brothers, they do a great job of teaching what to do once you get in front of the target, but not how to get in front of them to begin with. The fact that reps only prospect when they have nothing in the pipeline generally gets an agreement from managers that we talk to. The impact of this is twofold. First of all, when we first got into the business, we do skills training on telephone prospecting and see a great increase in the appointments coming right out of the box. As a matter of fact, the pipeline generally gets filled right up as a result. Then, depending on the average length of their buying cycles, the newly learned skills would atrophy, or at least until they became second nature. So because the reps don't like this part of selling, though, they avoid it like the plague, right? So the longer the buying cycle, the longer they go without doing it again. There's a second, though, more sinister result of this as well. And again, because of their dislike for telephone prospecting, sales professionals many times will hang on to dead opportunities well beyond the stage when they know in their heart of hearts that the deal's dead. And this leads to much wasted time and resources. Before covering what the differences, those real differences are between the pipeline selling phase and the appointment setting phase, the last item I wanted to cover here is an important one. And before giving some thought to this topic, many people are actually surprised by the fact that there's only really 3 sources for an initial appointment. The first one of them is lead generation marketing programs, and these come in basically 2 flavors. One is the more traditional set, such as direct mail, trade shows, and advertising. And the second is more recent and involves the use of social media, things like YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. But they all share one thing in common. They are marketing functions which are designed to get targets to raise their hands and say, hey, I'm interested. The second of these is networking and referrals. So things like BNI groups, chambers of commerce, and to some extent LinkedIn are examples of networking. But the last of these is good old-fashioned cold calling. And some are very surprised to hear that we really advocate as little cold calling as possible. We believe that it's basically the safety net. When we're not getting enough from those first 2 categories, there is no alternative. The problem is, at the end of the day, most lead generation programs don't supply us enough, even in the best of times. And networking and referrals are actually very time-consuming and never really were enough. But the really good news is the skills, tools, and processes that work for us pursuing warm leads will also work perfectly well for cold calling. As a matter of fact, they're identical. Let me give you an idea of what I mean by that. So let's say that I get a referral from someone who has a colleague in another company who the referrer thinks might be able to use our help. So I call that colleague and I tell him that so-and-so recommended that we get together. And in most cases, I'll still get exactly the same category of negative responses I would on a cold call. And that's because the referrer really doesn't know exactly what's going on in their friend's company or their life if it's a consumer call. Other priorities, budget restraints, and many other things might trump what we have to offer. The difference, though, will be in the politeness of how they say no, as they won't want to offend their friend. And if you don't believe so, just ask yourself this question. When your sales team gets leads and referrals, do they always get a sale? And the answer is, of course not. As a matter of fact, they don't even get the appointment, do they? So let's go back to this critical issue of, if I can get them through the pipeline easily enough, why the heck is it so hard to get them into the pipeline? So what we're looking at on the screen here is a simple depiction of 4 elements of selling that occur in both the buying cycle, i.e. once a target has agreed to become a prospect, and the appointment making stage that precedes it. And this, by the way, is one of the reasons why our approach is so successful. So let's take them one at a time in the pipeline stage. In an initial appointment, what we call the beginning repartee, or banter, if you will, is collegial, or it's warm. Our target has agreed to set this time aside for us so that it's friendly, they're open to us. The pace of the exchange is measured or comfortable. It's basically normal conversation. The responses we get from our target are generally thoughtful, and they're based on business logic because they've agreed to invest this time with us, right? They're interested in learning whether or not it makes sense to move forward with us at the end of the meeting. The final component is how we, as sales professionals, prepare for these meetings. This is the fun part of selling, and it impacts our closing ratios, and that's how good we are at thinking on our feet. How well can we ask and answer questions to guide the discussion in the direction that's beneficial to both of us, as no 2 initial appointments unfold exactly the same way. So now let's take a look at the telephone prospecting side of the chart. The first difference is felt right off the bat, isn't it? The beginning repartee is adversarial. It's certainly not friendly. The pace of the exchange seems to happen at 90 miles an hour. And part of the reason for that that it seems like a Nolan Ryan fastball is that the responses from the target contain what we like to call knee-jerk responses that are designed to do nothing but get us off the phone. As a matter of fact, most of them even are true. They are on autopilot, so they don't need to stop and think. So what that means for us sales professionals is that in order to prepare for appointment making calls, we must know our techniques cold. And to accomplish that, we just flat out must memorize them. The good news here, though, is that if we follow the tenets of the formula, which is our methodology for setting appointments, we can generally limit the different types of responses we'll hear to just one or two, so that we'll have to learn a minimal set of responses. So hopefully you can begin to see why, for instance, the objection handling techniques that we learn in the pipeline stage of selling don't really apply in the appointment setting stage very well. And I hope that this little introduction into the challenge that we face at consistently filling the pipeline and why traditional approaches to fixing it haven't worked will provide you with the confidence that we are a little bit different and that you'll find some answers on the rest of our website. And that will actually encourage you to pick up the phone and call us and let us have the opportunity to help you solve those challenges as well.